I don't know how much time I have left, and honestly, I'm freaking out. I signed up for something through the dark web that went way beyond what I was expecting. And now I'm trapped in this twisted game. I thought it was just a thrill, something edgy and fun, but it's real. It's terrifyingly real. It all started when I was bored one night, scrolling through forums, looking for something that could spice up my dull life. You know, the kind of boredom that hits when nothing excites you anymore. Same routine, same bullshit every day. I've always been into the darker side of the internet, not the illegal stuff, just the weird, creepy corners where people talk about paranormal things or share conspiracy theories. I like getting a little freaked out, I won't lie. So, when I stumbled on a thread about real-life murder mystery games hosted through the dark web, I was curious. I'd heard of escape rooms and live-action role-playing, but this was on another level. People were posting about how it was the most intense thing they'd ever done. Some said it felt so real, they couldn't tell if it was a game or something much darker. The adrenaline rush they described had me hooked before I even clicked the link. I should have known better. It wasn't just some harmless game. It wasn't like those cheesy murder mystery parties where you're given clues and everyone's laughing and pretending to be someone else. No, this was different. There was this invite-only link that you had to be approved for after filling out a questionnaire. It asked weird stuff that should have set off red flags in my head. Things like, what's your biggest fear? Do you think you could kill someone if it meant saving yourself? And how do you handle situations where you have no control? But I was cocky. I thought, yeah, I can handle this. I'm not afraid of a little dark web roleplay, right? After submitting my answers, I didn't think I'd hear back. But within a few hours, I got a confirmation email. They sent me a time, a place, and a set of instructions. I was to meet the other players at a specific location in 3 days. I was pumped. The email didn't say much about the other players or what to expect, just that I would be given a role when I arrived. All I had to do was show up. 3 days later, I drove to the location. It was an abandoned building in an industrial area, the kind of place where you'd imagine shady shit going down. I parked and sat there for a minute, staring at the dark windows. My stomach was in knots, but I wasn't about to chicken out. This was supposed to be fun, right? Just a messed up game to freak me out. I went inside, and it was empty, except for this old guy sitting at a desk. He looked me up and down, barely acknowledged me, and handed me a folder with a label on the front. Detective. Your role, he muttered without looking up. His voice was gravelly, like he'd smoked 1,000 cigarettes a day. I flipped open the folder, expecting to see something like a list of clues or some backstory, but there was only one piece of paper with 2 words: find him. I remember laughing at how dramatic it all seemed. I thought I was about to go on some cheesy scavenger hunt through the building, maybe solve a few puzzles, then call it a night. I wasn't prepared for what came next. As soon as I stepped through the next door, the whole vibe changed. The lights were dim, flickering, like they hadn't been maintained in years. The air was thick with dust, and there was this smell, like iron, like blood. That's when I realized this wasn't some fun mystery. This was something far more sinister. I heard footsteps echoing down the hall, and then this scream, sharp, piercing, like someone was being tortured. I froze. It was too real, too raw. My brain was screaming at me to leave, but my legs wouldn't move. I forced myself to walk towards the sound. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it was part of the game, like an actor putting on a show. But when I reached the room where the scream came from, I knew this wasn't pretend. There was a man, tied to a chair, covered in blood. His mouth was gagged, his eyes wide with terror, and standing over him was another man, wearing this twisted, grinning mask, like something out of a nightmare. The knife in his hand dripped blood, pooling at his feet. The guy in the chair was barely conscious, his chest rising and falling in shallow, ragged breaths. It wasn't a performance, it was real. I don't know how I didn't throw up right there. I stood frozen, and the guy in the mask turned to me, tilting his head like a curious animal. He didn't speak. He just stared, waiting for me to react.
I did the dumbest thing possible. I ran. I bolted down the hall, my heart pounding so hard I thought it was going to burst out of my chest. But every door I tried was locked. There was no way out. My mind raced. What the hell had I gotten myself into? Who were these people? What kind of twisted shit was this? Eventually, I found an empty room and slammed the door behind me, locking it with shaky hands. I collapsed against the wall, trying to catch my breath. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, hoping to call for help. But there was a new message instead. "You're the detective. You know what you need to do to end the game." I read it over and over, my mind trying to make sense of it. Then it hit me. The game wasn't about solving a mystery. It wasn't about finding clues or catching the killer. It was about becoming the killer. If I wanted to survive, I had to kill him. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind spinning, trying to figure out what to do. I didn't sign up for this. I wasn't a killer. But as I sat there, I realized something even worse. This guy wasn't the only one playing the game. After sitting in that room, heart pounding and my head spinning, I realized I wasn't alone. Not just in the sense that the masked guy was out there, but other people. I could hear movement, shuffling footsteps, whispers behind the walls. I wasn't sure if they were part of the game or just some sick psychos lurking in the shadows, but I knew one thing for sure. This was no escape room. This was survival.
The longer I stayed in that dark room, the more my paranoia kicked in. Every sound, every little creak made me jump. I didn't have a weapon, not even a stupid clue from my detective folder. They set me up to fail, and I could feel it in my bones. But I also knew one thing. I wasn't going down like that. I took a deep breath and checked my phone again, praying for some miracle. Another message popped up. This one was worse. Tick-tock. He's getting closer. End the game, detective. I could feel my stomach knot up, the bile rising in my throat. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a threat. If I didn't kill him, he was going to kill me. That masked guy. He was just waiting for his moment. This wasn't some psychological thriller where I could outsmart him. No, this was real. He had already tortured someone, probably killed them, and now it was my turn to face him. But here's the F*** ed up part. As scared as I was, a little voice in my head kept whispering, "You could do it." Like, what if it wasn't that hard? What if I could be the one to survive this twisted nightmare? I didn't want to die, and the more I thought about it, the more my survival instincts kicked in. And that's when things got really dark in my head. I was shaking, but I knew I couldn't just sit in that room waiting to be found. I had to move. I had to find something, anything, to defend myself. I opened the door just a crack, scanning the hallway. It was dead silent now. The flickering lights barely lit the area, casting these long, creepy shadows down the corridor. I didn't see anyone. For a moment, I thought maybe the masked guy had left, maybe the other people I heard had gone too, but deep down I knew better. They were just waiting, like predators, letting me squirm in my own fear. I crept down the hallway, my hands shaking, my mouth dry. My heart was beating so loud I was afraid it'd give me away. I was trying to stay quiet, but the floorboards groaned under my feet, and every step felt like it was echoing through the whole damn building. And then I found it. A storage room. The door was ajar, and inside, hanging on the wall, was an old, rusty crowbar. It wasn't much, but it was something. I grabbed it, feeling the cold metal in my hands, and for the first time, I felt a sliver of hope. If it came down to it, I could bash that guy's head in. I'd never hurt anyone in my life, but this wasn't the time to be squeamish. I started to make my way back down the hallway when I heard it. This low, raspy breathing coming from one of the rooms up ahead. My heart practically stopped. I pressed myself against the wall, gripping the crowbar so tight my knuckles turned white. The breathing got louder, more deliberate, like whoever it was, they were close, real close. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but then I saw it, his shadow, the masked guy. He was standing at the end of the hallway, his silhouette stretched out under the flickering light. He wasn't moving, just standing there, watching me. That mask, with its creepy, twisted grin, was burned into my brain at that point. The dude looked like something out of one of those snuff films you hear about but never actually want to see. And the worst part, he knew I was there. He was just asterisking with me. I raised the crowbar, taking a step back, but that's when he started moving, slowly, like he had all the time in the world. He didn't even rush, he just walked, casually, like he was coming to say hi. I backed up, my heart racing. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. He got closer, the light catching the glint of his knife still dripping with blood from his last victim. I snapped.
I screamed, charging at him with the crowbar raised. I don't even remember what I said, probably just some primal sound of fear and anger mixed together. He dodged me easily, like he'd done this 100 times before. My swing missed, and I stumbled, barely catching myself before hitting the ground. Before I could even recover, he was on me. He shoved me so hard I slammed into the wall, knocking the air out of my lungs. The crowbar fell from my hand, clattering to the floor. My vision blurred, but I could see him looming over me, that sick mask grinning down at me. His breath was hot on my face, reeking of something metallic and rotten. I don't know if it was the blood or something worse, but I could barely breathe through it. I thought that was it. I thought he was going to slit my throat right there, end the game for good. But instead, he leaned in close, the blade of his knife just grazing my cheek, and whispered, "You're not ready yet." And then he left. He ****ing walked away, leaving me there gasping for air, terrified and confused. What did he mean I wasn't ready yet? Ready for what? I scrambled to grab the crowbar, adrenaline surging through me. I had to get out of there. I didn't care about the game anymore. I didn't care about anything except surviving. But as I stood up, panting, I heard something new. Not the masked guy, not the whispers, crying. A soft, muffled sobbing coming from one of the rooms down the hall. I knew I shouldn't have gone towards it. Every instinct was telling me to run, but something about it sounded real. It didn't sound like part of the game. It sounded like someone was trapped here, someone who didn't sign up for this nightmare. I hesitated for just a second before walking down the hallway. The door was slightly open, and as I pushed it wider, I saw her. A girl, probably around my age, tied to a chair. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, and her wrists were raw from where she'd been struggling against the ropes. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with terror, and whispered, "Please, help me." I froze. Because behind her, standing in the shadows, was another figure, not the masked guy, someone else. I stood there, frozen, my heart hammering in my chest. The girl in the chair, tied up and crying, stared at me with this desperate look in her eyes. But it wasn't her that had me paralyzed. It was the figure standing just behind her, barely visible in the darkened corner of the room. They weren't moving. They didn't say anything, just stood there like some shadow, watching me. I don't know why, but for a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. Who was this? Another player, another victim, or something else entirely? Part of me wanted to just back out of the room, pretend I didn't see anything and run for my life, but I couldn't. Something about that girl, her sobbing, the sheer terror on her face, it made me stay. "Please," she whispered again, her voice barely audible over the sound of my own breathing. "Don't let them kill me." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mouth felt dry, and the room felt like it was closing in on me. I gripped the crowbar in my hand tighter, not sure if I was supposed to use it to defend myself or save her. The figure behind her, still cloaked in shadows, hadn't moved. It was like they were waiting for something. For me, maybe. Waiting to see what I would do next. I took a step into the room, keeping my eyes on the figure. My legs felt like they were going to give out at any second. I wanted to say something, ask what the hell was going on, but the words just wouldn't come. Every muscle in my body was tense, like I was ready to bolt any second, but I knew there was no point.
I had to face this head on. As I stepped closer, I saw the girl's wrists were bound with this thick, fraying rope, her skin rubbed raw from struggling. Blood trickled down her arms, mixing with her tears. She couldn't have been here long, but long enough to know that whoever had done this wasn't messing around. This wasn't a game for her. She was trapped, just like I was. The figure behind her shifted slightly, and my grip on the crowbar tightened. That's when I noticed something. Something that sent a chill straight through me. The masked man wasn't behind her. It was someone else. This new figure stepped into the dim light, revealing a face I hadn't seen before. He wasn't wearing a mask, but I almost wished he had been. His eyes were dark, sunken, like he hadn't slept in days. His skin was pale, almost sickly, and his mouth twisted into this unsettling smile. There was something off about him, like he didn't belong here, or maybe, like he belonged here too much. "You're not supposed to be here yet," he said, his voice low and hoarse. "But you've made things interesting." I opened my mouth to speak, but he cut me off, taking a step toward me. "You think this is about killing the masked guy, don't you?" His smile widened, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too unnatural. "That's just the surface. You're in much deeper than that now." I raised the crowbar instinctively, not sure what I planned to do with it. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of his words. I was supposed to kill the killer. That was the point of this F*** ed up game, wasn't it? But the way this guy talked, the way he looked at me, it was like he knew something I didn't. Like there was a much darker, much more twisted layer beneath it all. "You think you're the only detective?" he continued, his eyes locking onto mine. "There have been others, many others, and none of them made it out." His voice was like a slow, creeping poison seeping into my brain. "You won't either, not unless—" He trailed off, glancing at the girl. She was trembling, her eyes darting between us, like she was terrified of what was about to happen. And I realized, in that moment, what he was implying. He wanted me to kill her. "No," I whispered, taking a step back. "No *****ing way. I'm not doing that."
His smile didn't fade. "It's the only way you'll survive." He took another step forward, his hands twitching slightly. "Kill her, and you might just have a chance to end this. Refuse, and she dies anyway. But so do you." I felt like I was going to be sick. This was all too much. The masked guy, this psycho, the twisted rules of this game. It wasn't just about catching a killer anymore. It was about becoming one. I glanced at the girl, her eyes wide with terror, silently pleading with me to help her. I couldn't do it. There was no way. But the figure wasn't bluffing. He stepped closer, reaching into his pocket, pulling out something small and metallic. A gun. He aimed it casually at the girl's head, like it was nothing to him. Just another part of this sick, twisted game. "I'll make it easy for you," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Either you kill her with that crowbar, or I pull the trigger and blow her brains out right here. You decide how this ends." I stood there, shaking, my mind screaming at me to do something, anything, to stop this. But I was frozen, trapped between the most *****ed up decision I'd ever have to make. My hands trembled on the crowbar, and I could feel my stomach churning. The room felt like it was spinning, the walls closing in on me. I couldn't think straight. The girl sobbed louder now, her voice cracking with fear. "Please, don't let him kill me." I looked at her, then back at the man. He was calm, too calm, like he knew exactly how this was going to play out, like he'd seen it happen 100 times before. I tried to think of a way out, any way out. Could I rush him, take him down before he pulled the trigger? My mind was spinning with possibilities, but every scenario ended the same. If I made the wrong move, she was dead. If I didn't make a move, we were both dead. "I don't want to do this," I muttered, my voice shaking. "I'm not like you." The man's smile widened. "You'd be surprised what you're capable of when your life's on the line."
He cocked the gun, the sound echoing through the small room. The girl let out a strangled sob, and I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I didn't know what to do. There was no way out, no way to win. "I'll count to 3, he said, his tone casual, like he was enjoying every second of this. 1? I took a step forward, the crowbar heavy in my hand. My mind was screaming at me to stop, to put it down, but I couldn't. I couldn't just let her die like that. 2? The girl's eyes were wide, pleading. My hands were shaking. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't me. 3? The gunshot rang out, deafening in the small room, but it didn't hit the girl. The masked guy, the one I'd seen before, was standing in the doorway, a smoking gun in his hand. He had shot the man with the twisted smile right in the back of the head. The man collapsed to the ground in a heap, his smile still frozen on his face, his blood pooling on the floor. The masked guy lowered his gun and looked straight at me, his eyes cold, emotionless behind that twisted mask. "Game's not over yet," he said quietly. "But now, it's just you and me." I stood there staring at the masked guy, my whole body trembling. The sound of the gunshot still echoed in my head, the metallic smell of blood mixing with the musty air of the room. The man with the twisted smile lay crumpled on the floor, his eyes wide open, lifeless. But I barely had time to process it. The masked guy had just saved me. Or at least, that's what it looked like. But I knew better. He wasn't here to help me. He wasn't here to end this nightmare. No, this was just another F*** ed up level of the game. I was still trapped. The worst part, it was now down to just me and him, the killer. I kept the crowbar gripped tight in my hand, the weight of it somehow both comforting and terrifying at the same time. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. Could I take him down? Would I even stand a chance? My head was spinning. I had no clue what this guy was capable of, but if the trail of bodies I'd already seen was any indicator, he was way out of my league. The girl tied to the chair was sobbing uncontrollably, her face streaked with tears and panic. I wanted to help her, wanted to untie her and get us both out of there, but the masked guy didn't give me time to think. He slowly walked into the room, gun still in hand, not even glancing at the body on the floor. He moved with this eerie calm, like he had done this 1,000 times before. Like this was just another part of his twisted game. His eyes behind the mask never left me. I backed up against the wall, trying to put as much space between us as possible, but the room was small. I couldn't run. There was nowhere to go. He tilted his head, watching me like I was some kind of prey he was toying with. "You're tougher than the others," he said, his voice muffled but still carrying a hint of amusement. "Most break down before it even gets this far." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat was dry, my hands shaking, but I wasn't about to show him how scared I was. Not now. Not when I was so close to whatever the end of this nightmare was. He paced slowly, casually, like we weren't in some hellish game of survival. "You're the detective, right? You're supposed to solve the puzzle. But the thing is..." He paused, eyeing the girl still sobbing in the chair. "There's no puzzle to solve. You just survive, or you don't." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. This wasn't about finding clues or catching him. This was just pure, unfiltered horror. He was messing with me, enjoying every second of it. He stopped a few feet in front of me, staring down at the crowbar in my hand. "You're going to try to fight me, aren't you?" His voice was almost mocking, like he was daring me to make a move. "You think you can win?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. The truth was, I didn't know what the hell I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't let him win. I wasn't going to just roll over and die like the others, not without a fight. Suddenly, he moved. Fast. Before I could react, he lunged at me, grabbing the crowbar and ripping it out of my hands like I was nothing. I barely had time to process what happened before he slammed me into the wall, his forearm pressing against my throat, cutting off my air. I gasped, clawing at his arm, but he was strong, too strong. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred, spots dancing in front of my eyes. This was it. He was going to kill me right here, and there was nothing I could do. But then, out of nowhere, the girl screamed. It wasn't just a cry for help this time. It was a blood-curdling scream, filled with terror and desperation. She rocked the chair she was tied to, kicking out with her legs, trying to free herself. Her face was pale, eyes wide with pure panic. The masked guy glanced at her, distracted for just a second. That was all I needed. I shoved him with everything I had, managing to push him off just enough to gasp for air. I staggered back, grabbing the crowbar he'd dropped in the chaos, and swung it at him with all my strength. I missed. He dodged it easily, like he was playing some twisted game of cat and mouse. His mask grinned at me, mocking me. But I didn't stop. I swung again, harder this time, and this time I hit him. The crowbar connected with his side, and he let out a low grunt of pain. But it wasn't enough to stop him. He grabbed me by the throat, squeezing hard. I dropped the crowbar, my hands flying to his wrist, trying to pry him off me. My vision blurred again, the room spinning, but this time I was ready. I kicked him as hard as I could, right in the knee, and he buckled. I fell to the floor, gasping for air, my throat raw and burning. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing the crowbar once more. My hands were shaking, but I knew this was it. I had to kill him. I had no other choice. He was on his knees, breathing heavily, but still alive, still dangerous. His mask was cracked from where I'd hit him, revealing part of his face underneath, pale skin, blood trickling from a cut on his cheek. But his eyes were dead, cold, empty. There was no humanity left in him. I raised the crowbar above my head, ready to finish it, ready to end this nightmare once and for all. But then he laughed. It was a low, guttural sound, filled with amusement and something else, something darker. He looked up at me, his cracked mask grinning, and said, "You think killing me will end this? You think you'll win?" I hesitated, the crowbar still raised. "That's the thing about this game," he said, his voice low and raspy. "It never really ends." I didn't wait to find out what he meant. I brought the crowbar down as hard as I could, slamming it into his head. His body jerked, then went still. The mask shattered, pieces scattering across the floor. Blood pooled around him, dark and thick, soaking into the grimy tiles. For a moment, everything was silent. I dropped the crowbar, my whole body trembling, adrenaline surging through me. I stared at the masked guy's body, half expecting him to get up again. But he didn't. He was dead. It was over. Or at least I thought it was. I turned to the girl, who was still tied to the chair, sobbing quietly. I rushed over to her, my hands shaking as I tried to untie the ropes around her wrists. "It's okay," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "It's over. He's dead." But as I worked to free her, I realized something was wrong. The door. It was open, wide open. Someone else was standing there, watching us. I froze, my heart dropping into my stomach. Another figure, another mask. No, it wasn't over. Not even close. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My hands froze mid-movement as I stared at the open door. Another figure stood there, silhouetted in the dim light. A different mask, but the same twisted grin. My stomach dropped like I'd been punched in the gut. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't move. I had just killed him. I had ended it. How could there be someone else? The girl in the chair started shaking, her sobs getting louder, more frantic. "No, no, please, not again," she whimpered, her voice barely audible through her cries. I couldn't blame her. I felt the same way, like I was stuck in some kind of sick nightmare that would never end. But I knew one thing: if I didn't act fast, we were both dead.
The new masked figure stepped into the room, moving slowly, almost casually. I could hear the soft tap of their shoes against the floor, and every step sent a cold shiver down my spine. They didn't speak, didn't make a sound, just watched, like they were studying us, figuring out what to do next. I didn't know who this was, or what their role was in this F************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************My hands shaking as I fumbleded with the ropes around the girl's wrists. "We need to go," I whispered, my voice barely more than a breath. "Now?" But my hands were useless. They were trembling so badly I couldn't get the knots undone. The masked figure was getting closer, and I was running out of time. I looked around the room, trying to find anything that could help. My eyes landed on the crowbar, still lying on the floor next to the first masked guy's body. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. I scrambled over to grab it, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. The new masked figure was only a few feet away now, still silent, still watching. I didn't have time to think. I raised the crowbar, pointing it at them like it was some kind of shield. "Stay the F******* back," I shouted, my voice cracking with fear. But they didn't stop. They didn't even flinch. The figure tilted their head slightly as if amused and then reached into their jacket. For a second, I thought they were going to pull out a weapon, but what they pulled out was worse.
A phone. They held it up, showing me the screen. At first, I couldn't make out what it was, but then the image clicked in my brain like a shotgun blast. It was a live feed of me, of this room, of everything that had happened. The whole thing, every second of it, was being streamed. I felt like I was going to be sick. The twisted smile on the mask felt even more menacing now. They weren't just playing a game, they were broadcasting it. Somewhere people were watching us, laughing, cheering, waiting for the next kill. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just some underground dark web game. This was a show. A F********ing show where people paid to watch real-life horror unfold. And I was the star, the unwilling contestant in a blood-soaked nightmare reality show. I gripped the crowbar tighter, my palms sweaty and slick, and for a second I thought about charging the figure, ending it. But then I heard the girl again, her soft sobs cutting through the fog of fear clouding my brain. I couldn't leave her. I couldn't just run. I had to do something. I took a step toward the masked figure, keeping the crowbar raised. "Untie her!" I demanded, my voice shaking but steady. "Untie her, or I swear to God I'll—" They raised a finger to their lips, shushing me, and then they did something that sent a new wave of horror coursing through me. They pointed at the body of the first masked guy, the one I had killed, the one still lying in a pool of his own blood. I followed their gesture, my mind racing. What the hell were they trying to say? I didn't understand, until the figure reached down and slowly, deliberately tapped the first masked guy's head with the toe of their shoe. The dead man's body twitched. I blinked. No way. I had killed him. I had caved in his F*******ing skull. He couldn't be. The body jerked again, this time more violently. And then, impossibly, it started to move. His hands twitched, his legs spasmed, and before I could process what was happening, he was getting up. I stumbled back, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be happening. I had killed him. I saw him die. There was no way he was getting back up. But he did. Slowly, painfully, the first masked man rose to his feet, his head hanging at a weird angle, blood still dripping from the gash I'd made with the crowbar. He stood there, swaying slightly like a puppet waiting for strings to be pulled. The mask was shattered, revealing part of his face, a pale, lifeless face that no longer had any trace of humanity. The new masked figure stepped forward, casually patting the first man on the shoulder, like he was congratulating him on a job well done. The twisted grin on the second mask never wavered. I realized then what they were showing me.
It wasn't just a game. It was a loop. No matter what I did, no matter how many times I fought back, killed, or ran, it would never end. They would just keep bringing more, or worse, bringing them back. I felt like I was drowning in fear, my thoughts spiraling into a dark pit of hopelessness. There was no way out. There was no winning. This was my life now, an endless nightmare, played out for sick, twisted entertainment. The first masked man turned toward me, his movements stiff, unnatural, like his body was being controlled by something else. His dead eyes locked onto mine, and I could feel the bile rising in my throat. I backed up against the wall, the crowbar slipping from my sweaty hands. The new figure took a step closer, pulling out another phone. They held it up to my face, and I saw it, a timer, counting down. 10, 9, 8. I looked at the girl, still tied to the chair, still crying. I couldn't save her. I couldn't even save myself. 7, 6. I stumbled back, my legs barely holding me up. There was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. 5, 4. The first masked man took a step forward, his head lolling unnaturally, blood dripping from his shattered face. 3, 2. I closed my eyes, the realization sinking in like ice water in my veins. 1. The last thing I heard was the sound of the door slamming shut behind me.